I really am gathering information just to open up my world.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off you as well, because you're not interviewing for the position, and you're hopefully asking them stuff and hearing what they have to say. Did you analyze it after it was done, why you think she responded so strongly? She's
a friend of my sister, so.
What's that?
She's a friend of my sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a connection.
Yeah.
So your sister, a friend of your sister, and then you had that talk. So that's the difference with informational interviews and networking in general. In terms of getting out there and job fairs and going to networking, professional networking things, those are very helpful. Somebody who organizes those gave me a tip, which I'll pass on for what it's worth, which is they say when people go to these kinds of large events, probably you should spend the first half an hour just walking around, and before you start just zeroing in on things, to find out where the activity is, listening to people, and they'll start talking, oh, you should go visit so-and-so, they're hiring 25 engineers or something. But to spend time walking around and getting for a feel for what's happening and where things seems to be going on, and then start zeroing in. You don't have to hit every table, you don't have to talk to every person. And it's just, and they said, and it's kind of like, then you get a sense of which are like when you have restaurants and one is full and one is empty. It's like nobody ever goes into the empty one. I don't know why, but I'm not going in there. That same sort of thing about there are certain groups I will stay away from them. And the other thing they said is if you're in a networking situation where it's just everybody's coming together and we're going to introduce ourselves before the event happens, that's why everybody's there for that purpose. So I don't have to have the social niceties that I would necessarily at a party. It says, hi, my name is Douglas, so your elevator pitch is what I'm looking to do. You may or may not want to exchange cards. I may ask you for one, so you want to have some business cards, and then you're done. If somebody starts to monopolize your time, they told me you just excuse yourself to go to the restroom. And you won't see them again, so it doesn't. The next one, you can excuse yourself to go to the restroom 25 times. Doesn't mean you're actually going there, but this is a chance to get away from that person. Because you're not necessarily there to establish long-lasting relationships. You're there to gather information about what your job is and what you want to do with your job. And I've had people tell me, and again, from who organize these, if people come in and suddenly realize, it's not happening for me tonight, forgive yourself, leave, and go do something nice for yourself. Yeah, you have to treat yourself well, or it just will. I hate networking events. I love parties, I love meeting, but I hate networking events. Some people thrive on them because they like the impersonality of it. I mean, interact with 50, 100 people, and then we're done. Okay, home stretch. We're looking at page 16 and 17 we looked at, but 16, and we're taping this, so I shouldn't even be saying it, but I'm not as impressed with this page in terms of, I'm targeting the employers that you want to work for and the industry and setting up all this criteria. It's almost too persnickety in a way, and so you want to keep track of the organizations people tell you about or where you interview them. And so for me, like putting that in a file folder of its own was a useful way to organize that. But if you find that it makes sense to you to set up the criteria, that's great. Now, getting back to earlier about where do I go geographically, it is a tough one. I think it's helpful to, in one sense I'll say this, is to make a list of personal criteria for the kind of what I'm willing to do for my job. How big a geographic area? 1 second, Ian. Do I want to work in? Know that. We've had people who say, I have to be somewhere on the BART line. Okay, that's coming with its own restrictions. Or somebody else says, I'm willing to work anywhere, that I can drive to for my job. Okay, I thought that was true for me. I was in the .com world for a while in the early 90s, and I drove to Sunnyvale every day, and it took me an hour and a half to get to work and an hour and a half to get home. So I was spending 3 hours a day driving. It wasn't uncommon back then, but it was hideous. And when a recruiter called me about a position, my first criteria, I said, where is it? And she said, it was in San Francisco. I said, I will absolutely interview with them. And I left at other place and took a pay cut so I didn't have to spend 3 hours a day in my car. So it's important to have those criteria about geography, about type of organization you want to work in, what's your minimum or maximum of what you're willing to do. I'll work for anything and I'll do anything used to be an okay mantra. That doesn't work anymore. So there are too many people that are also willing to do that who, when I was unemployed this last time, it was the first time in my entire life since I was 15 that I didn't have a job. As I was growing up, I felt, maybe you guys that are younger can tell me, but being willing to do anything meant you could get a job. I was able to do that. Yeah, you could get a job. I worked in Kentucky Fried Chicken. I drove a taxi cab. I was a janitor in a nightclub. It's like you went in with that can-do spirit and it was possible to get a job. And I don't think that's true anymore. And so having that, you have to shift that focus from I need money, I have to pay my bills, I'll do anything. That's probably not going to help you get that job. But, yeah.
The problem I sometimes have is when you try to network, a lot of times people just tell you you need to apply online, goodbye.
All right. So that's why you want to have a list of a couple hundred places. So that's
Even
fine.
if it's the one you want. I'm saying a lot of times people say that you have to get your resume into the system and it's only done online, or you can mail it if you want or fax it, but it still needs to go into the pile with the others.
That's where
You can't get an interview just over the phone. You need to send us your stuff.
I know Kaiser is that way. They only accept online applications. They don't want a cover letter. They want it in this particular format. And so you are in a vast pool there. Same thing, we're working with the city on some healthcare jobs. You have to get a job with the Department of Public Health, which is one of the largest employers in San Francisco. You have to be on something called the list. And getting on the list is very hard to do. So we are building some workshops for some of our health people where Department of Public Health is going to come over and talk about how you get on the list. And with Kaiser, it's the same thing. Yeah, you can send in your online application. You're going to do much better finding a place to volunteer your time to get past that, file that application. And I mentioned that in the beginning, volunteering is increasingly, we just had this massive study that we just got about increased people's chances by 27% or something like that, volunteering, for the reason that it gets you in front of the hiring managers. And so you demonstrate your willingness to do things, and you're showing skill sets. So targeted volunteering is a great thing to do during this gap in your employment. Yeah.
How long should you volunteer?
Until you get a job.
With the same company.
Until you learn enough from that project, it's as long as it's benefiting you. This whole world of unpaid internships has become a gold mine for companies. So really looking for volunteer things. Like I said, for me, I had this interest in food. So I spent a year volunteering with food organizations and the work I'd been doing was around social justice stuff. So they had that piece. So I combined those two things so that when people said, what have you been doing for the last year? Well, I volunteered at the SPCA and I volunteered, not random volunteering. I said I worked in social justice on food-related projects. What did you do? Well, I worked with this organization, I worked with this organization, and this is what I did. So it actually sounded like a job. I mean, like a specific job. So I would say if you are benefiting still from the work you're doing with that organization, then you can continue to volunteer with them.
How would I benefit?
You're learning about the organization. You're learning about if there's some specific technology you want to learn. If there's some specific job category you want to explore, what does this job thing mean, if you want to just build some relationships with people there. It's even within, if you're volunteering at an organization, that's a great time to then set up information interviews with other people in the organization. You can even do, if I were to apply for a job at a similar organization, then that's gold, because chances are somebody there knows those other people.
Okay, so don't volunteer at the place you want to work, obviously.
I mean, you can, but they're not linked directly. They're just absolutely not linked directly. And if that's the reason you're doing that, then I think you're going to face a lot of disappointment.